Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was Neglected by All His Peers. He was meant to be the Hokage, the beacon of hope. But what if Naruto's earliest days were marked not by camaraderie, but by crushing isolation? This isn't just a story about a different Naruto. It's about a Konoha that broke its own hero, and the profound, dark implications that ripple through a shinobi world without its guiding light. If you guys enjoy this What If, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The first written examination of the Chunin selection exams took place in the Academy's largest classroom, a space that had been transformed overnight into something resembling an interrogation facility rather than an academic testing environment. Rows of individual desks stretched across the room with mathematical precision, each positioned to prevent collaboration while maximizing surveillance opportunities for the proctors who moved between them like predators stalking prey. Naruto took his assigned seat in the third row, 7th position from the left, a placement that provided excellent observation angles while maintaining sufficient distance from other participants to avoid unwanted attention. Around him, genin from multiple villages settled into their own positions with varying degrees of confidence and anxiety. The psychological pressure was palpable, designed to create stress responses that would separate those capable of functioning under extreme conditions from those who would crack when faced with genuine adversity. Ibiki Morino as chief proctor, Naruto noted as he observed the scarred Chunin who commanded the room with his mere presence. Torture and interrogation specialist. They're treating this as psychological warfare rather than academic evaluation. The examination rules, when announced, confirmed his assessment. 10 questions, each worth 10 points, with the twist that teams would be eliminated based on their collective performance rather than individual scores. Cheating was explicitly forbidden but practically encouraged through the obvious positioning of planted experts throughout the room. The real test wasn't knowledge, it was information gathering under hostile surveillance. Classic intelligence operation simulation, Naruto analyzed while reviewing the question paper that had been distributed with elaborate ceremony. They want to see who can acquire sensitive information without detection while maintaining plausible deniability. The questions themselves were deliberately beyond academy-level curriculum, requiring either advanced theoretical knowledge or creative information acquisition to answer correctly. Mathematics involving trajectory calculations for siege weaponry, cryptography principles used in field communications, strategic analysis of historical battles that had shaped modern village politics. For most participants, the examination would require careful observation of designated sources, subtle communication between team members, or innovative techniques for accessing restricted information. For Naruto, whose photographic memory contained years of unauthorized research through Konoha's archives, the questions were merely an opportunity to demonstrate carefully calibrated competence while maintaining his facade of struggling mediocrity. Question 3, analysis of the Battle of Kanabi Bridge, he noted while crafting his response. Standard Chunin-level tactical assessment, but I need to answer correctly enough to pass while appearing to struggle with concepts that should be challenging for someone of my supposed capabilities. His approach to each question followed the same mathematical precision he had perfected during his academy years. Correct answers derived through apparent effort and marginal understanding rather than comprehensive knowledge. Strategic errors that suggested limited analytical capability without demonstrating complete incompetence. The performance required acting skills that would have impressed professional theater companies, all executed under conditions where detection would mean immediate elimination. Around him, other participants employed various methods for acquiring the information they needed. Some attempted crude visual surveillance, craning their necks to observe more knowledgeable teammates or planted experts. Others used basic sensory enhancement techniques to eavesdrop on whispered conversations. A few of the more sophisticated candidates deployed minor jutsu, paper manipulation, reflection techniques, chakra-enhanced perception to gather intelligence without obvious cheating behavior. Fascinating variety of approaches, Naruto observed while maintaining his own facade of struggling concentration. Each method reveals different training priorities and cultural approaches to information warfare. The most interesting observation came from monitoring the proctors themselves, whose attention patterns revealed as much about the examination's true purpose as the questions being asked. Ibiki and his assistants weren't looking for crude cheating attempts. They were evaluating the sophistication and subtlety of information-gathering techniques, noting which participants could operate under surveillance without detection. They're compiling capability assessments, Naruto realized as he watched a proctor make discrete notes about a sound Genin's paper manipulation technique, creating intelligence profiles that will influence future mission assignments and threat evaluations. 45 minutes into the 90-minute examination period, Ibiki announced the 10th question, the one that would determine not just individual scores, but fundamental psychological characteristics that separated true shinobi from those who merely possessed combat skills. "Before I give you the 10th question," the proctor announced, his scarred face impassive as stone, "there are some additional rules you need to understand." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the subtle sounds of nervous breathing and shifting fabric as every participant focused complete attention on their examiner. "First, you may choose not to take the 10th question," Ibiki continued, his voice carrying implications that extended far beyond the words themselves. "However, if you choose not to take it, your points will be reduced to 0 and you will fail along with your teammates." Classic psychological pressure technique, Naruto noted while maintaining an expression of growing anxiety appropriate to his persona. Offering escape routes that carry unacceptable consequences to test commitment levels under stress. Second, Ibiki's voice grew even more ominous. "If you choose to take the question and answer incorrectly, you will be banned from taking the Chunin exams forever." The reaction was immediate and electric. Several participants gasped audibly, while others began whispering urgent consultations with their teammates. The psychological weight of the announcement was staggering. A single wrong answer could permanently end their advancement prospects, trapping them forever at Genin rank regardless of their future development. Magnificent psychological manipulation, Naruto observed with professional admiration as panic spread through the room like wildfire. Complete fabrication, of course. No single examination could carry such permanent consequences. But the stress response will reveal everything about each participant's relationship with risk, failure, and commitment. One by one, hands began rising as participants chose the escape route rather than risk permanent failure. Each withdrawal was accompanied by the bitter disappointment of teammates who were eliminated through association, creating additional psychological pressure for those who remained. Fascinating cascade effect, Naruto noted as roughly a third of the original participants abandoned the examination. Fear of failure overriding commitment to advancement goals. Exactly the response pattern Ibiki intended to generate. When the withdrawals finally ended, Ibiki surveyed the remaining participants with something approaching approval. These were the candidates who possessed the psychological fortitude to accept catastrophic risk in pursuit of their objectives. The fundamental mindset that separated elite shinobi from conventional soldiers. "Congratulations," he announced with dry satisfaction. "Everyone who chose to remain has passed the first examination." Of course, Naruto thought as confused murmurs rippled through the survivors. The 10th question was the choice itself, the willingness to risk everything rather than accept certain failure. Classic commitment assessment disguised as academic evaluation. The revelation that there had been no actual 10th question, that the psychological pressure had been the real test, provided valuable insights into the examination's true objectives. This wasn't about knowledge or even information gathering capability. It was about identifying individuals with the mental resilience necessary for high-stakes operations where retreat wasn't an option. Selection rather than evaluation, Naruto concluded as Ibiki explained the examination's actual purpose. They're filtering candidates based on psychological profiles rather than technical competency. The transition to the second examination began immediately, with successful teams being transported to Training Ground 44, the Forest of Death, for what was announced as a survival exercise with deliberately ominous undertones. The very name of the location suggested challenges that would extend far beyond simple wilderness navigation or basic combat skills. As Team 11 gathered their equipment and prepared for transportation, Naruto found himself processing the implications of what they had just experienced. The written examination had provided valuable intelligence about the overall examination structure, while confirming his assessment of the event's true significance as something far more complex than routine promotion evaluation. Stage 1 complete, he noted while maintaining appropriate excitement about their advancement. Psychological assessment disguised as academic challenge. Stage 2 will likely focus on survival capabilities and team dynamics under extreme stress. The Forest of Death, when they finally arrived at its imposing perimeter, exceeded even Naruto's expectations for environmental hostility. Ancient trees towered overhead, their canopy so dense that the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight. The air itself felt oppressive, heavy with moisture and the distinctive scent of predators who had claimed this territory as their hunting ground. "Welcome to Training Ground 44, announced the second proctor, a woman whose purple hair and mesh bodysuit immediately identified her as Anko Mitarashi. Also known as the Forest of Death, though I suppose you'll find out why soon enough. Anko Mitarashi, Naruto catalogued while observing the special Jonin's obvious enthusiasm for psychological intimidation. Former student of Orochimaru, torture specialist, sadistic tendencies that suggest personal trauma channeled into professional methodology. The rules for the second examination were deceptively simple. Retrieve scrolls hidden throughout the forest while surviving for 5 days against both environmental hazards and competing teams. Each team began with either a Heaven or Earth scroll, requiring them to acquire the corresponding type through whatever means necessary. Controlled chaos, Naruto analyzed as teams were assigned their starting positions around the forest's perimeter. 90 participants competing for 45 scroll sets, meaning approximately half, will be eliminated through direct confrontation rather than environmental hazards. Team 11 received an Earth scroll, requiring them to locate and acquire a Heaven scroll from another team willing or unable to defend their possession. The mathematics were straightforward. They would need to engage in combat with competing genin under conditions where lethal force was explicitly authorized. First actual combat evaluation, Naruto noted as his teammates discussed strategy with the earnest determination of students who had never faced opponents genuinely intent on killing them. Time to discover how effectively I can contribute to team success while maintaining my carefully calibrated incompetence. The forest interior proved even more hostile than its perimeter had suggested. Within hours of entering, Team 11 encountered leeches the size of small dogs, insects whose venom could paralyze a grown adult, and predatory plants that used chakra-based techniques to hunt sentient prey. The environment itself was designed to test not just survival skills, but the ability to function under constant threat while pursuing mission objectives. Impressive biological diversity, Naruto observed while helping his teammates navigate through a section of forest where the trees themselves seemed to be stalking them. Someone has invested considerable resources in creating an ecosystem specifically designed to challenge shinobi capabilities. Their first encounter with competing teams came on the second day, when Team 11 detected the distinctive sounds of combat echoing through the forest canopy. Investigation revealed a three-way battle between teams from Grass, Rain, and Sound villages. Their struggle centered around possession of the scrolls that would determine advancement to the next examination phase. Tactical opportunity, Naruto noted as he observed the engagement from concealment while his teammates debated whether to intervene. All three teams are exhausted from extended combat. Optimal moment for acquiring objectives with minimal risk. "We should wait," Konoha whispered, his voice carrying the uncertainty of someone facing life-or-death decisions for the first time. "Let them weaken each other, then move in when they're vulnerable." "That seems cold," Mogi replied, her moral discomfort obvious despite the strategic sound of the approach. "Shouldn't we help someone?" Classic ethical dilemma, Naruto analyzed while maintaining his facade of nervous indecision. Do we prioritize mission success over moral considerations? Perfect test of value systems under pressure. The question became moot when the Sound team emerged victorious, their opponents either dead or unconscious on the forest floor. Three genin wearing Otogakure forehead protectors stood over their fallen enemies with expressions of casual satisfaction, apparently untroubled by the violence they had just committed. Interesting combat capabilities, Naruto noted as he analyzed the Sound team's techniques through careful observation. Audio-based jutsu, enhanced physical modifications, coordination that suggests specialized training beyond normal academy curriculum. What happened next would become one of the examination's most talked about moments, though for reasons no one would initially understand. The Sound team, flush with victory and confident in their superiority, began searching the surrounding area for additional opponents who might threaten their newly acquired scrolls. Their hunt led them directly toward Team 11's concealed position, creating a confrontation that none of the Konoha genin were prepared to handle. "Well, well," called the apparent leader of the Sound Team, a boy with spiky hair and arms that seemed somehow wrong in their proportions. "Looks like we found some Leaf Village weaklings hiding in the bushes." Zaku Abumi, Naruto identified while maintaining his expression of terrified shock, air pressure manipulation through modified arms. Dangerous at medium range, vulnerable to close combat if approached correctly. "We don't want any trouble," Konohamaru said, stepping forward with admirable courage despite his obvious fear. "We're just trying to complete the examination like everyone else." "How noble," sneered the Sound Kunoichi, whose long hair and contemptuous expression marked her as someone accustomed to using cruelty as both weapon and entertainment. "Unfortunately, noble doesn't help you in the real world." Kintsuchi, Naruto cataloged, Senbon specialist with possible audio genjutsu capabilities. Team coordinator and tactical leader despite not being the nominal leader. The third member of the Sound Team had remained silent, his bandaged form suggesting either extensive injuries or deliberate concealment of identifying features. His chakra signature felt different from his teammates, older, more controlled, carrying undertones that suggested experience far beyond typical genin level. Dosu Kinuta, Naruto concluded. Sound manipulation through gauntlet-mounted resonator. Potentially the most dangerous of the three despite his quiet demeanor. "Here's what's going to happen," Zaku announced with obvious relish. "You're going to hand over your scroll, and then we're going to demonstrate why Sound Village produces superior shinobi." Classic intimidation technique designed to avoid actual combat, Naruto noted while his teammates struggled with the tactical implications of their situation. They're confident enough to expect surrender without resistance. Konohamaru's response demonstrated exactly the kind of determination that had earned him a place in the Chunin exams despite his young age. "We won't surrender. If you want our scroll, you'll have to take it." Admirable but tactically unsound, Naruto analyzed as the Sound Team prepared for combat with obvious enthusiasm. "He's committed us to an engagement we're not prepared to win through conventional means." What followed was a brief but intense battle that showcased the vast difference between academy training and real-world combat experience. Zaku's air pressure attack shattered trees and carved craters in the forest floor. Kin's senbon work was precise enough to pin opponents without killing them, demonstrating control that spoke of extensive practice. Dosu's sound manipulation created disorientation effects that left their opponents vulnerable to follow-up attacks. Team 11, despite their determination and theoretical competence, found themselves overwhelmed by opponents who fought with lethal intent and sophisticated technique coordination. Within minutes, Mogi and Udon were down, unconscious from chakra exhaustion and trauma. Konohamaru remained standing but was clearly outmatched, his conventional academy techniques insufficient against enemies who had been trained specifically for killing. Tactical failure proceeding according to predictable patterns, Naruto observed while maintaining his position on the engagement's periphery. Time to determine whether team preservation requires revealing capabilities that compromise my long-term objectives. The decision point came when Zaku prepared to deliver what was clearly intended as a lethal finishing blow to the defenseless Konohamaru. The Sound Genin's expression carried the cold satisfaction of someone who genuinely enjoyed inflicting pain and death, his modified arms building pressure for an attack that would cause massive internal trauma. Moral threshold exceeded, Naruto concluded with crystalline clarity. Team preservation takes precedence over operational security. For the first time since his academy graduation, Naruto Uzumaki allowed his mask to slip. The movement was subtle, just a shift in posture that transformed him from helpless observer to active participant. But the change in his chakra signature was unmistakable to anyone with sufficient sensitivity to detect such variations. Where before there had been the weak, unfocused energy patterns of a struggling academy graduate, now there was something entirely different. "Hey," Naruto called, his voice carrying none of the nervous uncertainty that had characterized his previous communication. "Pick on someone your own size." Perfect balance of heroic intervention and calculated understatement, he noted while preparing to demonstrate capabilities that would reshape everyone's understanding of Team 11's tactical capabilities. Zaku turned toward him with obvious amusement, his modified arms already shifting position to target this new threat. "Oh look, the dead last wants to play hero. This should be entertaining." He's expecting academy-level opposition, Naruto observed while analyzing optimal approaches for neutralizing 3 opponents without revealing the full extent of his capabilities. Perfect opportunity for strategic misdirection. What happened next would be discussed and analyzed for years afterward, though few observers would ever understand its true significance. Naruto moved. Not with the clumsy enthusiasm of an academy graduate attempting techniques beyond his comprehension, but with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years perfecting every aspect of his combat methodology. His speed was shocking, not Jonin level, but far beyond anything that should have been possible for someone with his reputation and training history. Zaku's first attack missed by inches, as Naruto seemed to simply not be where the air pressure blast was directed. The Sound Genin's follow-up attempt met the same result, then a third, each failure increasing his frustration and confusion. Basic evasion patterns disguised as exceptional luck, Naruto noted, while maintaining careful limitations on his demonstrated capabilities. Showing competence without revealing systematic training or advanced tactical knowledge. Kin's Senbon attack was deflected with a kunai throw that appeared to be more fortunate than skillful, though careful observation would have revealed the mathematical precision required to achieve such results. Dosu's sound manipulation encountered unexpected resistance, as Naruto seemed mysteriously unaffected by techniques that had disabled his teammates within seconds. Controlled resistance through minor chakra enhancement, Naruto analyzed while engaging in what appeared to be desperate defensive maneuvering, demonstrating unusual resilience without revealing understanding of the underlying techniques. The turning point came when Naruto's desperate counterattack somehow managed to position all 3 Sound Genin where they interfered with each other's techniques rather than supporting their coordinated assault. What looked like fortunate coincidence was actually the result of tactical analysis and positioning that would have impressed Chunin-level strategists. Perfect orchestration disguised as chaos, he noted with satisfaction as the Sound team found themselves suddenly at a disadvantage they couldn't quite understand. They're experiencing systematic tactical failure while perceiving only random events. The engagement concluded when Naruto's lucky final technique, a shadow clone assault that he deliberately made appear unstable and poorly controlled, somehow managed to overwhelm Dosu's defenses while Zaku and Kin were distracted by their inexplicable coordination failures. Mission accomplished, Naruto thought as the 3 Sound Genin retreated in confusion and humiliation, leaving behind the Heaven Scroll that Team 11 needed for advancement. Objectives achieved while maintaining plausible deniability regarding true capabilities. The aftermath was revealing in ways that extended far beyond simple tactical success. As Team 11 regrouped and tended to their injuries, Naruto observed his teammates' reactions to what they had witnessed with careful attention to the psychological implications. Naruto, Konohamaru said, his voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and confusion. How did you, where did you learn to fight like that? Classic cognitive dissonance, Naruto noted while crafting his response to reinforce perceptions of accidental competence rather than hidden expertise. He's struggling to reconcile what he witnessed with his established understanding of my capabilities. I don't know, Naruto replied with convincing bewilderment. I was just so scared they were going to hurt you guys that I stopped thinking about technique and just reacted. Maybe desperation made me lucky. Perfect deflection combining emotional motivation with disclaimer of conscious skill, he analyzed while his teammates processed this explanation. Reinforces perception of situational competence rather than systematic capability. But the most significant reaction came from an unexpected source. Hidden in the forest canopy above their position, a figure in Sound Village attire had observed the entire engagement with professional interest that transcended simple tactical assessment. Orochimaru, Naruto realized as he detected the distinctive chakra signature that marked one of the legendary Sannin. He's conducting personal reconnaissance, evaluating candidates for purposes that extend far beyond the official examination objectives. The Snake Sannin's attention had been focused initially on other teams, specifically, the survivors from various villages who demonstrated exceptional potential for his long-term projects. But Naruto's unexpected display of competence had apparently shifted that focus in directions that could prove either advantageous or catastrophic. Interesting development, Naruto thought as he felt the weight of Orochimaru's analytical gaze. Someone whose perceptual capabilities might be sophisticated enough to see through my carefully maintained facades. As Team 11 secured their scrolls and began the journey toward the forest's central tower, Naruto found himself processing the implications of what had just occurred. For the first time since beginning his careful charade of mediocrity, he had been forced to reveal capabilities that contradicted his established reputation. Mask integrity compromised, he concluded while maintaining appropriate celebration of their advancement to the next examination phase. Strategic adjustments required to account for increased scrutiny and potential investigation of inconsistencies. The preliminary rounds were approaching, and with them would come challenges that would test not just his combat abilities, but his capacity for maintaining deception under the most intensive scrutiny he had yet encountered. Time to discover, he thought as the central tower grew visible through the forest canopy, whether controlled revelation of capabilities can be managed without complete exposure of strategic objectives. The genius was beginning to emerge from the shadows, but the world was not yet ready to understand what it was seeing. The announcement of the month-long preparation period between preliminary and final rounds of the Chunin exams should have been a moment of celebration for the advancing genin. Throughout the academy, successful candidates gathered in excited clusters to discuss training plans, mentor assignments, and strategies for the battles ahead. The air hummed with anticipation and nervous energy as young shinobi contemplated the opportunities that lay before them. Naruto observed these celebrations from his customary position of invisible observer, noting the way information flowed through social networks he could never access. Conversations revealed which candidates had already been approached by potential mentors, which techniques were being prioritized for intensive development, and most tellingly, which political considerations were influencing training assignments. Fascinating resource allocation patterns, he noted while maintaining his facade of quiet satisfaction at advancing to the finals. Each mentor assignment reflects both individual assessment and larger strategic objectives. The pattern was clear and predictable. Sasuke had been claimed immediately by Kakashi, their relationship carrying forward despite the trauma of their previous mission together. The copy ninja's personal investment in developing the last Uchiha's capabilities overrode any lingering guilt about past failures. Rock Lee would continue his training under Might Guy's enthusiastic guidance, their bond already established through months of dedicated instruction. Even Shikamaru had been selected for advanced strategic training under Asuma Sarutobi, recognition of analytical capabilities that matched his family's intellectual traditions. Logical mentor-student pairings based on compatibility and development potential, Naruto analyzed as he processed the social dynamics unfolding around him. Each assignment designed to maximize individual growth while serving larger village interests. And then there was Team 11's situation. "Congratulations on your advancement to the finals," Ebisu announced to his assembled students, his tone carrying the appropriate mixture of pride and concern. "This represents a significant achievement that reflects well on your dedication and training." Konohamaru beamed with obvious pleasure, his excitement barely contained as he fidgeted in place. "Does this mean we get special training for the finals? I heard some of the other candidates are working with really powerful sensei." Natural expectation based on observed patterns, Naruto noted while watching Ebisu's expression shift to something approaching discomfort. "He's about to deliver disappointing news." "Well," Ebisu began carefully, adjusting his sunglasses with characteristic nervous precision, "the village's training resources are limited. With so many candidates advancing to the finals, there simply aren't enough specialized instructors available for individual attention." Translation: "Were not considered high-priority assets worthy of premium instruction," Naruto translated mentally while maintaining an expression of patient attention. "However," Ebisu continued with forced optimism, "this provides an excellent opportunity for independent development. You'll have complete freedom to focus on your individual strengths and address any weaknesses you've identified." Moga's face fell with obvious disappointment. "So we're training alone, no sensei, no special techniques, no advanced instruction. Self-directed learning builds character and initiative," Ebisu replied with the tone of someone trying to convince himself as much as his students. "Many great shinobi achieved their greatest breakthroughs through independent study and experimentation." Diplomatic way of acknowledging that we've been written off, Naruto observed while his teammates processed this information with varying degrees of acceptance and resentment. The reality was both predictable and illuminating. Team 11 had advanced to the finals through competence rather than exceptional ability, placing them in the category of candidates who had exceeded expectations without demonstrating the kind of standout potential that warranted premium training resources. They were success stories to be celebrated, but not investments to be prioritized. Perfect cover for conducting unsupervised research, Naruto concluded as Ebisu concluded his brief meeting with apologetic encouragement and scheduling information for the finals. 30 days of complete training freedom, while everyone assumes I'm struggling with basic technique refinement. The first week of independent training revealed the full scope of how thoroughly he had been forgotten by the village's educational establishment. While other finalists received personal instruction, advanced technique scrolls, and carefully planned development programs, Naruto found himself with unlimited access to basic training facilities and absolutely no oversight whatsoever. Remarkable bureaucratic oversight, he noted while conducting reconnaissance of the various training grounds assigned to other candidates. No supervision schedules, no progress evaluations, no resource allocation tracking for my activities. The abandoned training ground 43 became his primary research facility, its damaged infrastructure and restricted access making it ideal for experiments that required complete privacy. The area had been closed to normal use following a training accident that had left several structures unstable. But for someone with Naruto's infiltration capabilities, the security measures were merely suggestions rather than actual barriers. Perfect laboratory conditions, he thought as he established equipment caches and research materials throughout the area's concealed sections. Isolated, monitored by no one, and already expected to contain unusual chakra signatures from previous damage. The real work began with systematic analysis of techniques he had observed but never formally studied. Months of covert observation had provided him with detailed knowledge of jutsu ranging from basic academy curriculum to advanced jonin-level applications, all memorized with perfect clarity but never tested under controlled conditions. Shadow clone jutsu, he declared, filling the training ground with dozens of perfect duplicates. Baseline technique confirmed stable, he noted as his clones began organizing into research teams with practiced efficiency. Time to explore theoretical applications and advanced variations. The month of solitude became a masterclass in independent jutsu development that would have impressed even legendary researchers. Each day brought new experiments as Naruto systematically deconstructed observed techniques to understand their underlying principles, then reconstructed them with modifications that pushed beyond their original limitations. The breakthrough came during his second week, when careful analysis of the Forbidden Scroll's contents, which he had memorized during his academy graduation incident, revealed connections between disparate techniques that suggested entirely new applications. Multi-shadow clone jutsu, he read from his perfect mental copy of the scroll's contents. Theoretical basis suggests exponential scaling rather than linear progression. Fascinating implications for tactical applications. What followed was perhaps the most intensive research period of his life, as Naruto explored the mathematical relationships between chakra expenditure, clone quantity, and stability maintenance that governed shadow clone techniques. The Forbidden Jutsu's documentation was incomplete, clearly intended for practitioners who already understood the underlying principles, but his systematic approach to experimentation filled in the missing details with scientific precision. Chakra distribution follows geometric rather than arithmetic progression, he concluded after his 50th successful test of large-scale clone generation. Each additional clone requires exponentially more control rather than simply more raw power. The implications were staggering. Most shinobi who attempted the multi-shadow clone jutsu failed not because they lacked sufficient chakra, but because they misunderstood the control requirements for maintaining large numbers of simultaneous duplicates. With proper technique refinement, the theoretical upper limit was far higher than official documentation suggested. 1,000 clones successfully maintained for 37 minutes, he recorded in his mental research notes after pushing his capabilities to their apparent maximum. Stability compromised by control fatigue rather than chakra depletion. Technique optimization could potentially double effective capacity, but the true revelation came when he began exploring applications that extended beyond the Forbidden Scroll's documented techniques. His perfect memory of observed jutsu provided a vast database of chakra manipulation methods that could be combined, modified, and improved through systematic experimentation. Transformation techniques integrated with shadow clone generation. he noted while observing a squad of clones who had each assumed different appearances through precise chakra molding. Perfect infiltration capabilities limited only by imagination and preparation time. The substitution jutsu yielded equally fascinating results when subjected to advanced analysis. What most shinobi used as a simple escape technique could be refined into something approaching short-range teleportation when combined with enhanced timing and positioning calculations. Substitution clone hybrid technique, he documented after successfully creating a chain of instantaneous position swaps that allowed him to cross the entire training ground in less than 2 seconds. Effective range limited by line-of-sight requirements and chakra efficiency considerations. Each discovery led to new experiments, each successful technique suggested additional modifications, and each day of research revealed capabilities that exceeded anything suggested by his official academy training records. By the end of his second week, Naruto was regularly employing jutsu combinations that would have challenged Chunin-level opponents, all developed through independent analysis and experimentation. Remarkable what systematic study can accomplish, he reflected while reviewing his progress documentation. Amazing that no one has thought to investigate these obvious optimization opportunities. The truth was that most shinobi learned techniques through repetition rather than understanding, accepting established limitations rather than exploring potential improvements. The kind of comprehensive analysis Naruto was conducting required both theoretical knowledge and practical capabilities that were rarely combined in a single individual, especially not one young enough to dedicate unlimited time to pure research. Advantage of invisibility, he noted with dark satisfaction. No expectations means no limitations on exploration scope. His training regimen expanded beyond pure technique development to include comprehensive physical conditioning that would support his enhanced capabilities. The massive chakra expenditures required for advanced shadow clone techniques demanded corresponding improvements in stamina, recovery speed, and control precision that pushed his physical development far beyond normal genin parameters. Interesting adaptation patterns he observed while monitoring his body's response to increasingly intensive training loads. Accelerated development suggesting optimization opportunities that conventional training methodologies fail to exploit. The conditioning work revealed another crucial advantage of his isolation. Without instructors imposing appropriate limitations based on age and experience assumptions, he could push his development at whatever pace his capabilities could sustain. The results were dramatic improvements in strength, speed, and endurance that would have drawn uncomfortable questions under normal training circumstances. Physical capabilities now approaching Chunin baseline levels, he calculated after comprehensive testing of his enhanced attributes. Technique sophistication significantly exceeding documented academy graduate standards. But perhaps the most significant development during his month of solitude was the gradual emergence of strategic thinking that transcended simple technique mastery. Each experiment taught him not just how to perform specific jutsu, but how to analyze any technique for potential improvements, weaknesses, and tactical applications. Pattern recognition protocols established, he noted while reviewing his methodology documentation. Any observed technique can now be deconstructed, understood, and optimized within approximately 48 hours of initial exposure. The capability represented a fundamental transformation in how he approached shinobi arts. Instead of being limited to techniques he had been formally taught, he could now acquire and master virtually any jutsu through careful observation and systematic analysis. The implications for future development were staggering. Intelligence gathering takes on entirely new significance, he realized while planning applications for this enhanced learning capacity. Every technique observed becomes a potential addition to personal arsenal. As his third week began, Naruto found himself exploring applications that extended beyond individual technique development into comprehensive tactical analysis. His enhanced shadow clone capabilities allowed him to conduct elaborate war games and strategic simulations that would have required teams of specialists under normal circumstances. Battle Scenario 17. Asymmetric engagement against numerically superior opposition, he documented while directing dozens of clones through complex tactical exercises. Optimal approach involves information warfare and psychological manipulation rather than direct confrontation. The simulations revealed strategic principles that weren't taught in academy curriculum. insights into how real conflicts unfolded when removed from the artificial constraints of training exercises. Each scenario tested different aspects of tactical thinking, from resource management to deception techniques to long-term strategic planning. Fascinating how actual combat dynamics differ from idealized training scenarios, he noted while reviewing simulation results. Conventional training emphasizes fair engagement and honorable tactics that would be catastrophically inappropriate in real conflicts. The strategic education continued with comprehensive analysis of historical battles documented in Konoha's archives, his perfect memory allowing him to reconstruct engagements in precise detail for tactical study. Each conflict revealed patterns of success and failure that built into a comprehensive understanding of how wars were actually won and lost. Political considerations consistently override pure military efficiency, he concluded after analyzing dozens of historical conflicts. Victory belongs to those who understand the larger context rather than those who simply excel at individual combat. The lesson had profound implications for his own development priorities. Technical proficiency was necessary but insufficient. True capability required understanding the political, economic, and social forces that determined how conflicts actually unfolded in the real world. Integration of technical skills with strategic thinking, he noted while revising his training priorities. Optimal development requires simultaneous advancement across multiple capability domains. His final week of preparation focused on developing techniques specifically designed for his upcoming finals performance. The challenge was creating jutsu that would appear impressive without revealing the true sophistication of his analytical capabilities or the full extent of his technical mastery. Performance optimization for controlled revelation, he documented while practicing techniques that would demonstrate advancement without exposing systematic capability development. Maximum impact while maintaining operational security regarding actual capacity levels. The solution involved creating what appeared to be desperate improvisation, but was actually carefully planned tactical deception. Techniques that seemed to emerge from luck and determination rather than methodical research and development. Combat applications that suggested natural talent rather than systematic study. Perfect performance balance, he concluded after numerous rehearsals of his planned exhibition. Advancement demonstration that reinforces existing perceptions while achieving immediate tactical objectives. As the month of preparation drew to its close, Naruto found himself in possession of capabilities that far exceeded anything suggested by his official training records. His technique mastery approached Jonin levels in several specialized areas. His strategic thinking incorporated principles that weren't taught until Chunin rank or beyond, and his analytical capabilities allowed him to deconstruct and counter virtually any technique he might encounter. Transformation complete, he noted with quiet satisfaction while reviewing his comprehensive development documentation. Strategic foundations established for long-term capability advancement. The finals would provide the perfect testing ground for everything he had developed during his month of solitude. Not just his enhanced techniques, but his refined approach to performance management and strategic deception. The world expected to see marginal improvement from a lucky academy graduate who had somehow advanced beyond his apparent capabilities. They have no idea what 30 days of unrestricted research and development can accomplish, he thought as he made final preparations for the upcoming examinations. Time to discover whether genius refined in solitude can defeat talent shaped by traditional instruction. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of the Chunin exams, and with it, the most significant test yet of his ability to reveal capabilities while concealing their true source and scope. The month of solitude was ending, but the education it had provided would reshape everything that followed. Perfect preparation for controlled emergence, he concluded as darkness fell over training ground 43 for the final time. The genius is ready to step into the light, carefully, strategically, and with full understanding of the consequences. The finals would determine not just advancement to Chunin rank, but whether his carefully crafted persona could survive the scrutiny that came with public recognition of exceptional ability. Everything he had learned about being invisible was about to be tested against the challenge of being seen. Time to discover whether the art of being nobody can evolve into the art of being somebody, he reflected as he departed his secret laboratory for what might be the final time. Without losing the advantages that invisibility had provided, the month of solitude was complete. The genius had emerged from the shadows, refined by isolation into something the world was not prepared to understand or contain. Tomorrow, that genius would begin revealing itself to a world that had forgotten it existed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The arena buzzed with an energy that transcended mere sporting excitement, its stone walls containing the collective anticipation of thousands who had traveled from across the elemental nations to witness the Chunin Selection exam finals. The massive amphitheater had been constructed specifically for such events, its tiered seating rising high above the central combat area where the next generation of shinobi would prove their worthiness for advancement. From his position in the competitors section, Naruto observed the crowd with the analytical detachment that had become his trademark. Dignitaries from multiple villages occupied the elevated viewing boxes, their presence transforming what should have been a simple promotion examination into a complex diplomatic event with far-reaching political implications. Fascinating power dynamics, he noted while cataloging the seating arrangements and security protocols visible throughout the arena. Each village's delegation positioned to maximize intelligence gathering opportunities while projecting strength through their most promising candidates. The Hokage's box commanded the arena's prime position, where Hiruzen Sarutobi sat alongside various village leaders and distinguished guests. The third Hokage's expression carried the careful neutrality appropriate for a host, though Naruto's enhanced perception detected subtle signs of tension that suggested awareness of threats beyond simple examination oversight. Political theater with lethal undercurrents, Naruto analyzed as he studied the crowd dynamics. Too many variables, too many potential flashpoints. Someone is planning to use this event for purposes that extend far beyond promotion evaluation. The other finalists occupied designated seating areas, their nervous energy palpable as they prepared for public demonstrations of their capabilities. Most appeared to be handling the pressure with varying degrees of success, some projecting confidence they might not actually possess, others allowing anxiety to show despite their best efforts at composure. Naruto's attention focused particularly on one figure who stood apart from the general nervousness permeating the competitors section. Gaara of the desert sat in perfect stillness, his pale green eyes fixed on something beyond the physical boundaries of the arena. The red-headed Genin's presence seemed to create a sphere of unease around him, causing other candidates to unconsciously maintain distance despite the limited seating space. Interesting psychological profile, Naruto observed while studying the Sand Village representative. Complete emotional isolation, signs of severe trauma, and underneath it all, something that feels distinctly familiar. The familiarity was troubling in ways that extended beyond simple recognition. There was something about Gaara's chakra signature, subtle resonances that suggested experiences and burdens that most people would never understand. The sensation triggered memories of conversations overheard in childhood, fragments of information about the village's darker secrets that had never been fully explained. Another container, Naruto realized with crystalline clarity as the pieces fell into place. He's carrying something similar to what I am, but the implementation has gone catastrophically wrong. The revelation added layers of complexity to what was already a volatile situation. If Gaara was indeed a Jinchuriki like himself, then his presence in the exams represented far more than simple diplomatic participation. Jinchuriki were strategic weapons, village-level assets whose deployment required careful political consideration. For the Sand Village to send their container to Konoha suggested either supreme confidence or desperate necessity. Or it's part of a larger plan that requires his presence here specifically, Naruto concluded as he observed the subtle positioning of Sand Village operatives throughout the crowd. Too many variables aligning coincidentally. This is orchestrated. Will all finalists please report to the arena floor for the opening ceremonies, announced the proctor, a special jonin whose scarred appearance and professional demeanor marked him as someone accustomed to managing dangerous situations. As the competitors descended to the combat area, Naruto found himself walking parallel to Gaara, the two Jinchuriki separated by only a few meters of space that felt charged with unspoken understanding. Neither acknowledged the other directly, but the awareness was mutual and unmistakable. He knows what I am, Naruto noted, while maintaining his facade of nervous excitement appropriate to his public persona, and I know what he is. The question is how that knowledge affects the dynamics of whatever conflict is about to unfold. The opening ceremonies followed predictable patterns, speeches about the importance of international cooperation, the value of peaceful competition between villages, and the honor of representing one's homeland before distinguished guests. Hiruzen's address struck the appropriate notes of diplomatic hospitality while carefully avoiding any mention of the political complexities underlying the event. Standard misdirection designed to maintain surface civility while deeper currents remain hidden, Naruto analyzed as he listened to the formal pronouncements. Everyone knows this is about more than promotion evaluation, but the fiction must be maintained for appearances. When the initial matchups were announced, Naruto felt a surge of dark anticipation that he carefully concealed behind an expression of determined concentration. The random selection process, which was anything but random, given the political considerations at play, had produced exactly the pairing that promised maximum psychological complexity. First match. Uzumaki Naruto versus Gaara of the Desert. Of course, Naruto thought with satisfaction that bordered on genuine excitement. Someone wants to see what happens when two containers face each other under controlled circumstances. Perfect opportunity for comparative analysis. As the other finalists returned to the observation area, Naruto and Gaara took their positions at opposite ends of the arena floor. The space between them felt charged with potential energy, as if the very air was aware that something significant was about to unfold. The crowd's reaction was mixed, excited murmurs from those who anticipated an entertaining match between unknown quantities, concerned whispers from those who recognized the Sand Genin's reputation for lethal violence. The betting pools that had emerged throughout Konoha strongly favored Gaara, though the odds reflected lack of information about his opponent rather than comprehensive tactical analysis. Perfect underestimation, Naruto noted as he assumed a ready stance that appeared competent but unremarkable. They're expecting a massacre, which creates optimal conditions for controlled revelation of capabilities. Begin, called the proctor, his voice carrying clearly across the arena despite the crowd noise. What followed was unlike any shinobi combat most observers had ever witnessed. Gaara's response to the start signal was immediate and overwhelming. Sand erupted from the gourd on his back with liquid violence, forming waves and spears that sought to end the match before his opponent could mount any meaningful resistance. The display was both spectacular and terrifying, demonstrating control over his element that far exceeded normal genin capabilities. But Naruto was no longer there. His movement wasn't the desperate dodge of someone barely avoiding death. It was the calculated repositioning of someone who had anticipated exactly this opening gambit and prepared accordingly. Where most opponents would have been caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the assault, Naruto seemed to flow around the attacks with almost supernatural precision. Interesting technique integration, he noted while evading another wave of killing sand. Earth manipulation combined with what feels like direct chakra animation, sophisticated beyond normal elemental mastery. "You're different," Gaara said, his voice carrying across the arena with disturbing calm. Most people scream when they see death approaching. Psychological warfare through intimidation, Naruto analyzed while continuing his evasive pattern. He's accustomed to opponents breaking under pressure rather than adapting to his capabilities. "Maybe I've seen death before," Naruto replied, allowing a note of weary knowledge to color his voice. "Maybe I understand that screaming doesn't change anything." The response seemed to genuinely surprise Gaara, whose attacks paused momentarily as he processed this unexpected reaction. Most opponents either cowered in terror or raged with desperate fury when faced with his overwhelming power. Calm acceptance was something entirely new in his experience. Perfect opening for psychological analysis, Naruto thought as he seized the momentary hesitation to study Gaara's combat patterns more closely. Time to discover what drives someone who has walked a parallel path but reached such different conclusions. "You don't understand," Gaara said, his sand resuming its lethal dance with renewed intensity. "I exist to kill. It's the only thing that proves I'm alive, the only thing that justifies the space I occupy in this world." Classic existential crisis manifesting as homicidal compulsion, Naruto diagnosed while avoiding a particularly creative attempt to crush him between converging walls of sand. He's using violence to validate his existence because no one has provided alternative sources of meaning. "That's one way to look at it," Naruto agreed conversationally, his tone suggesting he was discussing philosophical abstractions rather than fighting for his life. "But have you considered that maybe the space you occupy doesn't need justification? That maybe you exist for reasons that have nothing to do with what others expect from you?" The question hit Gaara with visible impact. his sand faltering again as concepts he had never seriously considered suddenly demanded attention. The idea that his existence might have intrinsic value, independent of his capacity for destruction or others' reactions to his presence, was so foreign to his worldview that processing it required conscious effort. Direct engagement with core psychological issues, Naruto noted with satisfaction as he observed Gaara's confusion. He's never encountered someone who understands his circumstances but draws different conclusions from similar experiences. "You talk like you know," Gaara said, his voice dropping to dangerous levels as his sand began forming more complex patterns around the arena. "But you don't know anything about what it means to be hated, to be feared, to be treated like a monster from the moment you draw breath." Perfect opening, Naruto thought as he prepared to reveal knowledge that would fundamentally alter the psychological dynamics of their confrontation. "I know what it's like to be invisible," he said quietly, his voice somehow carrying despite the crowd noise and the sound of shifting sand. "I know what it's like to exist in a space where no one sees you, acknowledges you, or remembers that you're there. I know what it's like to be so thoroughly dismissed that even your presence becomes irrelevant to the people around you." Gaara's attack stopped completely, his sand hanging suspended in the air as he stared across the arena at his opponent with something approaching recognition. "Invisible is different from hated," he said finally, though his voice lacked its previous certainty. "Is it?" Naruto asked, genuinely curious about Gaara's perspective. "You get reactions, fear, hatred, violence, but at least people acknowledge that you exist. They see you as a threat, as something to be avoided or destroyed, but they see you. What do you do when people look right through you? When your very existence is so meaningless that their minds refuse to process your presence?" Comparative analysis of isolation experiences, Naruto thought as he watched Gaara struggle with concepts that challenged his fundamental understanding of suffering and neglect. He's built his identity around being feared and hated, but he's never considered the alternative of being completely ignored. "At least you're free," Gaara said after a long moment of contemplation. "No one watches you, controls you, uses you as a weapon for their own purposes. You can choose your own path." "Can I?" Naruto asked, allowing genuine complexity to enter his voice. "When no one sees you make choices, do the choices actually matter? When your actions have no consequences because no one notices them, are you really free, or are you just trapped in a different kind of prison?" The philosophical exchange was interrupted by a subtle shift in the arena's atmosphere, a change so minute that most observers wouldn't notice it, but unmistakable to anyone with enhanced sensory capabilities. Tension that had been building throughout the examination period was approaching a critical threshold. Something's coming, Naruto realized as he detected the distinctive chakra signatures of multiple high-level threats positioning themselves throughout the arena. This conversation is about to become academic as larger events unfold. But before he could fully process the implications of what he was sensing, Gaara's psychological state underwent a dramatic transformation. The philosophical complexity that had characterized their exchange evaporated as something darker and more primitive surged to the surface. "It doesn't matter," Gaara snarled, his sand responding to his emotional volatility with renewed aggression. "Philosophy doesn't change what we are. Monsters exist to destroy, and that's all there is to it." Psychological regression under stress, Naruto noted as he observed Gaara's return to simpler, more destructive patterns of thinking. The deeper conversation was threatening his established coping mechanisms, so he's reverting to familiar territory. What happened next would be debated and analyzed for years afterward, though few witnesses would ever understand its true significance. Instead of escalating the conflict, instead of revealing his own capabilities in response to Gaara's increasing violence, Naruto made a choice that would alter the trajectory of everything that followed. He stopped fighting back. Not because he was overwhelmed or outmatched, though that's how it appeared to the watching crowd. Not because he lacked the ability to counter Gaara's techniques, though his official records suggested exactly that limitation. But because he recognized something in Gaara's psychological state that required a different kind of response. He needs to win, Naruto realized as sand began to surround him, despite his ability to evade it indefinitely. His entire sense of self depends on being the apex predator, the ultimate threat that no one can challenge. Taking that away from him would be more destructive than any physical defeat. "You're holding back," Gaara accused as his sand finally managed to capture Naruto's apparently exhausted form. "You're not taking this seriously." "Maybe," Naruto agreed, making no effort to escape the increasingly tight bonds that held him. Or maybe I understand that some battles aren't worth winning. Controlled defeat to preserve psychological stability, he noted with clinical detachment as Gaara's sand began applying crushing pressure that would soon render him unconscious. Strategic loss in service of larger objectives. The decision wasn't entirely altruistic. As the sand tightened around him and the crowd roared its approval for the spectacular finish, Naruto was processing intelligence that suggested his defeat might serve purposes beyond simple psychological consideration for his opponent. Genjutsu deployment detected throughout the arena, he noted as subtle chakra disturbances began affecting the crowd's perception and awareness. Mass psychological manipulation on a scale that requires multiple coordinated sources. The invasion had begun, exactly as he had anticipated based on the intelligence gathered during his month of preparation. Orochimaru's forces were implementing whatever plan had brought them to Konoha, using the Chunin exams as cover for an operation that would devastate the village's defenses and eliminate key targets. Perfect timing, Naruto thought as consciousness began to fade under the pressure of Gaara's technique. My apparent defeat removes me from immediate consideration as either threat or asset, allowing optimal positioning for intelligence gathering during the chaos that's about to unfold. As darkness claimed him, Naruto's last conscious observation was the subtle shift in Gaara's expression, a flicker of something that might have been disappointment, or perhaps recognition that victory over an opponent who refused to truly fight carried no satisfaction. Psychological seeds planted, he noted with satisfaction as unconsciousness finally took hold, now to discover what harvest they might yield when the real conflict begins. The arena erupted into chaos as the invasion commenced in earnest, but for Naruto Uzumaki, the battle was just beginning. His defeat had positioned him exactly where he needed to be, overlooked, underestimated, and free to operate in the shadows while others focused on more obvious threats. The finals nobody expected were about to become something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. And in the center of it all, an invisible genius prepared to shape events from the darkness where he had always belonged. But the cost of his strategic choices was about to become apparent in ways that would haunt him far longer than any physical defeat ever could. The stage was set for tragedy on a scale that would reshape the very foundations of the shinobi world. Thanks for listening, I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video, peace.